The sun was blazing over the city, turning every street corner into a furnace. Horns echoed, vendors yelled over each other, and the chaos of the afternoon swallowed everything in noise. In the middle of it all stood a young girl. Her clothes were plain, her sandals worn thin. In one hand, she held a small plastic bag. Her eyes squinted against the sunlight, her skin damp with sweat, but she didn't complain. She was used to being invisible. As she waited at the crosswalk, her eyes caught an old woman standing at the edge of the road. Her hands trembled as she held a walking stick, eyes darting from one speeding car to another. She looked terrified. Without thinking twice, the girl stepped forward. "Ma'am, let me help you," she said softly, her voice barely above the street noise. The old woman looked at her, surprised. Then she smiled faintly and nodded. "God bless you, my child." They moved together, slowly navigating through impatient drivers and honking motorcycles. The girl held the woman gently, shielding her with her own body as they crossed. They had almost reached the sidewalk when the girl's elbow lightly brushed against the side mirror of a black Mercedes parked close to the curb. It was barely a touch, nothing that would cause a scratch, nothing anyone would even notice. But someone noticed. The door of the Mercedes flung open with force. A tall man stepped out, dressed in an expensive black suit, his shoes polished to perfection. His sunglasses gleamed, and his presence demanded attention. The way he walked, the way he stood, he looked like someone who thought the world owed him respect. He yanked off his glasses and stared at the girl. "Are you stupid?" he barked, his voice sharp enough to cut through the noise of the street. The girl froze, still holding the old woman's arm, confused, unsure what was happening. "You touched my car," he snapped again, stepping closer. "Do you even know how much this costs?" She looked at the car, then back at him. Her voice trembled. "Sir, I didn't even—" Before she could finish, his hand flew across her face. The slap cracked louder than anything else on that street. The plastic bag in her hand dropped to the ground. Her cheek turned red instantly. Her lips parted in shock, but no sound came out. Everything around them went quiet. The people passing by stopped in their tracks. Some pulled out phones. Others just stared. No one stepped forward. No one said a word. The man stood tall, breathing heavy like he had just won something. "Girls like you should stay away from things you can't afford," he muttered. "Next time, watch where you're going." Her eyes welled up, but she didn't let a single tear fall. She bent down slowly, picked up the plastic bag, and helped the old woman to the sidewalk without saying another word. The woman whispered to her, "Leave him. God is watching." She nodded once quietly and started walking. Not a single person in that crowd moved. Not a single voice spoke up for her. And yet, the way she walked, silent, calm, head lowered, held more strength than anyone expected. She didn't scream. She didn't defend herself. She didn't need to, because what that man didn't know was that she wasn't the kind of girl he thought she was. She wasn't weak. She wasn't poor. And she definitely wasn't done. He got back into his Mercedes, pulled out a white handkerchief, and wiped the side mirror like it had been stained by her presence. Then he slammed the door and drove off, vanishing into the traffic as if nothing had happened. But this city wasn't done with him yet, and neither was she. The door closed behind her with a soft click. The noise of the city disappeared, replaced by silence that hung heavy in the air. She stepped out of her dusty sandals and walked slowly through the polished marble hallway. The house was massive, walls lined with priceless art, floors that reflected light like glass. But none of it made her feel anything. She entered her room, set the plastic bag down, and looked at herself in the mirror. Her cheek was still red, her eyes still glassy. She touched the spot where his hand landed. It burned, not just the skin, but deep inside. The shame, the humiliation, the crowd's silence, his words. She sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall. Her name was Alera Okoye, only daughter of Chief Benson Okoye, one of the most powerful men in Lagos, a man who sat at the head of business tables, shook hands with ministers, and made decisions that shifted millions. Her father didn't just own companies, he owned entire buildings. But Alara never cared about that. When she left for London 7 years ago, she left behind not just her home, but the titles that came with it. And when she returned, it wasn't to claim status. It was to understand life from the other side. She had read stories, seen documentaries, watched the poor being pushed, ignored, insulted. But she didn't want to see it from behind tinted glass. She wanted to feel it, touch it, know how the world treated the ones no one saw. So for the last 2 weeks, she left the mansion every morning dressed as a common girl. No driver, no makeup, just a small bag, old clothes, and quiet eyes. What she witnessed in those streets changed her, but nothing changed her more than today. She had expected rudeness, maybe a few looks, but not this, not a slap, not humiliation in front of 100 strangers, and certainly not for helping an old woman. She replayed it again and again, the way he yelled, the way no one stopped him, the way even the wind seemed to pause when his hand hit her face. She should have screamed. She should have said who she was, but she didn't, because that would have ruined everything. Her experiment had given her the raw truth, and now she couldn't unsee it. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Her father stepped in. He was tall, dressed in his usual sharp suit, but his expression was soft, concerned. "You came back early today," he said, sitting beside her. "I was tired," she replied, forcing a smile. He studied her face. His eyes paused on the cheek. "You're not hurt, are you?" "No," she said quickly, turning her face slightly away. There was a long silence. "You've been going out every day since you returned," he said calmly. "No driver, no security. No one knows where you go." She looked at him, unsure how to answer. "Your mother is worried." "I needed space," she whispered, "just to see the city. On my own." He nodded slowly, but his eyes didn't move from her cheek. "You're strong like your mother," he said after a pause, "but even strength needs rest." She nodded. "If there's something I need to know, you'll tell me, right?" "I will," she whispered. "Just not today." He didn't press further, just stood up, placed a hand on her shoulder, and said, "We're having a family dinner tomorrow. It's important. Be ready." She nodded again, forcing a smile. When he left, she turned back to the mirror. She wasn't ready. Not for dinner. Not for pretending everything was fine. But she had no choice. Because the world didn't stop for broken hearts. And because the man who slapped her had no idea that tomorrow their paths would cross again. Only this time, not on the street. The next evening arrived faster than she expected. The mansion was glowing with soft lights, and the staff moved in quiet urgency. Alara sat in front of the mirror again, this time not in faded clothes, but a deep emerald dress that shimmered with elegance. Her earrings matched. Her hair was styled perfectly, but her heart wasn't in it. She wasn't thinking about the food or the guests or the way her father had insisted this dinner would be important. All she could think about was that slap, the man's face, his voice, the way her dignity was stripped in seconds. She had buried the pain as best as she could, but the bruise on her heart still throbbed. Downstairs, Chief Benson stood by the door, his voice warm. "Our guests have arrived," he said. "You look beautiful, my daughter." She stood up slowly, adjusted her bracelet, and smiled politely. "Let's go." Across town, Tunde adjusted his tie inside his parents' car. He was restless. This wasn't how he imagined meeting his future wife. His father had said it was already arranged, and the girl came from power, wealth, and a legacy that matched theirs. He was expected to smile, play along, and make the connection work. "It's just dinner," his mother said with a smile. "It's not just dinner if you're choosing my wife," he muttered. "Trust us," his father replied. "She's everything you need, and more." They pulled into the restaurant driveway, a high-end private venue known only to the elite. The moment they entered, the staff stood straighter. Every detail was precise. The flowers, the soft piano in the background, the glass walls glowing from city lights outside. Alara was already seated with her parents at a long table near the back. Her posture was graceful, her face calm. But inside, she didn't feel composed. Not tonight. Something in her gut wouldn't sit still. Then the maitre d' announced, "The Adesina family." She looked up casually, then everything inside her shattered. He was walking toward her. The man from the street, the man who slapped her in front of a crowd. Tunde stopped mid-step. His face turned pale. Their eyes locked. And the entire room, for that 1 second, disappeared. His jaw clenched. Her eyes narrowed. The family stood, exchanging polite greetings, handshakes, introductions. But Alara heard none of it. She could only hear the blood rushing in her ears. "This is Tunde Adesina," her father said proudly. "The young man I told you about. Your future husband." Alara stared at him, her lips parting slightly in disbelief. Her smile died. Tunde's voice barely escaped his throat. It's a pleasure to meet you." She didn't respond right away. Her throat had gone dry. Her past, her pain, her silent rage. They all stood in front of her, in the form of this well-dressed man. How could it be him? How could this be the man her father trusted? She nodded once, composed. "Excuse me, I need some air." She stood and walked toward the balcony without waiting for a response. Her heels clicked softly across the marble. But inside, she was shaking. Tunde followed, his mind racing. She stood facing the city, arms crossed. He hesitated behind her, then took a breath. "Alara!" She turned slowly. So much in her face was calm, but her eyes, they held fire. "You're the girl from the street," he said, voice trembling. "I had no idea." "Don't say it," she cut him off sharply. "You didn't know who I was, but it shouldn't have mattered." He looked down, ashamed. "I wasn't thinking. I was angry. You slapped me," she said, the words slicing clean through the night. "You humiliated me, and now you're standing here pretending like we're strangers." He stayed silent. "You didn't even see me that day." "Not really. You just saw what you thought I was. Poor, powerless, disposable." Her voice cracked slightly, but she held her ground. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I can't take it back, but I swear I didn't know." "I don't need your apology," she whispered. "I needed your respect, and that should have never depended on who I am." The silence that followed was heavier than any slap. Inside, their parents continued talking, unaware of the storm building outside. But the two of them knew the dinner was over. And the engagement had just become the most complicated thing either of them had ever faced. Tunde stood frozen on the balcony, the city lights flickering behind him. But his mind was stuck in darkness. He had faced investors, boardrooms, and hostile negotiations. But nothing prepared him for this. She turned back toward him slowly, her voice low, sharp like a knife that had waited years to cut. "Do you even remember me?" she asked. His brows furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I'm not just the girl you slapped on the street," she said. "I'm the girl you once promised you'd never forget." He blinked, confused. "You really don't recognize me," she whispered, a sad smile on her face. "Wow." He stared at her, searching for something familiar. Then she said it. "There was a mango tree in the village, behind your grandmother's house." His breath caught. "We used to sit there every afternoon, share boiled corn, tell stories. You carved your initials into the bark and told me one day you'd build a big house next to that tree." Pieces started falling into place. Images that had gathered dust inside his mind began to glow. She stepped closer, just enough for her voice to hit deeper. "You called me Lara, and I gave you my bracelet before I left for school abroad. Remember?" He stood there like a man who had just seen a ghost. His mouth opened, but no words came out. "You used to say, 'I'll never forget you.'" Her voice cracked just slightly. "But you did." His face lost all color. "Alara," he breathed. "You're that girl from OKE Village?" She nodded. The same one you used to chase butterflies with. The one who beat you in every running race. The one who cried when her father said she had to leave. I didn't know, he said, voice broken. I didn't recognize you. Because you didn't look, she interrupted. Not on the street, not even when I was right in front of you. He stepped forward. Lara, if I had known, I swear. But that's the point, she said. You should have needed to know. That's what hurts the most. He looked away, ashamed. The boy I knew would have helped a stranger, not hurt one. I'm not that boy anymore, he whispered. No, you're not, she replied. That boy had nothing, no money, no power, but he had something better. Kindness. Tunde felt like something inside him had collapsed, the weight of who he had become pressed down like a mountain. I never meant to hurt you, he said. I was angry. You were arrogant, she corrected him. You didn't see me. You saw what you wanted to see. A nobody. Silence wrapped around them again. Only the distant sound of traffic reminded them the world was still moving. She looked at him for a long moment. Then softly she added, I didn't come back to judge you. I came back to see the truth. And I've seen enough. She turned away and started walking back inside. He called out, Lara, wait. But she didn't. He watched her disappear through the glass doors, her figure shrinking behind the chandeliers and polished floors. His heart pounded in his chest, but it wasn't from attraction. It was from regret. He leaned on the railing, trying to breathe, trying to process the weight of what just happened. The girl he had forgotten, the one who once gave him her favorite bracelet under a mango tree, had grown into a woman who looked him in the eye and reminded him who he really was and who he no longer deserved to be. The next morning, the mansion staff opened the front gate to find a basket of flowers on the doorstep. Inside was a handwritten note. I'm sorry, I was blind, Tunde. Alara looked at it once, then placed it gently in the trash. The following day, it was a box of chocolates and a rare book on African history. She didn't open either. Then came the messages. Can we talk? Please let me explain. I never meant to hurt you. Each one read. None replied. Her phone buzzed quietly every few hours, and every time it did, she would look at it, and then set it down without a word. The girl who once waited beneath a mango tree for letters that never came was now a woman who no longer had time for apologies. Days passed, and Tunde grew desperate. He sent flowers to her workplace. He waited outside her home in his car, but never got out. He even spoke to her driver once, asking if she was okay. But the answer remained the same: silence. Alara had built a wall around herself, one made of pride, pain, and old memories she wished had stayed buried. But the truth was, she wasn't numb. She read every word, she saw every gesture. She just didn't trust them. One evening, as she walked out to her family's garden, she found someone unexpected waiting. Tunde's mother. The woman stood, hands folded politely, eyes filled with both concern and quiet shame. I hope you don't mind, she said gently. I didn't come to pressure you. I just wanted to talk. Alara nodded slightly. The older woman took a seat beside her. He's changed, you know, she said, more than I've ever seen him change. He doesn't eat, he doesn't sleep. All he says is your name. Alara kept her eyes on the ground. I'm not here to excuse what he did. That slap, that moment, it haunts him. Alara finally looked up, her voice quiet but firm. He didn't slap me because of who I was. He slapped me because he thought I was nothing. The woman nodded slowly. I understand. Alara's next words were heavier. I don't recognize the boy I once loved. He was kind. He had nothing. But he was enough. I don't know who this man is. Tunde's mother didn't argue. She placed a soft hand on Alara's and said, then let him earn your memory back. That night, Alara stared at the bracelet on her nightstand, the one she had given him as a child, the one he had forgotten for years. And somewhere across the city, Tunde stood in front of a press conference. Cameras flashed, Reporters waited. He took a deep breath. "I've come to announce something personal," he said. "I am stepping back from my engagement, not because my family asked me to, but because the woman I was meant to marry deserves better than who I've become." Whispers ran through the room. "If she ever forgives me," he continued, "it should be her choice, not her father's, not mine, hers." He walked away from the microphones. No more flowers, no more messages, just silence, and pride swallowed for good. The days that followed felt colder than usual. Rain fell more often. Even the city seemed quieter. Alara didn't smile much, and Tunde didn't speak unless he had to. They were both walking through the same kind of loneliness, one filled with everything unsaid. He missed her. She missed who he used to be. But neither of them reached out. Not yet. Because love that deep sometimes needed time to break before it could be rebuilt. The weeks turned to months. Alara buried herself in charity work. If the world had taught her anything, it was that dignity could vanish in an instant, but kindness could still restore it. She spent her mornings in orphanages, afternoons teaching girls in overcrowded schools, and weekends volunteering in clinics where the air smelled of medicine and survival. But even in the middle of all that good, something inside her still ached. She told herself it was over, that she had closed the chapter. But some pages don't turn so easily. One morning, during a meeting with a fellow organizer, a brochure slid across the table. "You've heard about the foundation, right?" the woman asked. Alara picked it up. "No. What is it?" "A youth shelter. Opened quietly. No sponsors listed. No press. Just showed up one day and started changing lives." Alara stared at the image. A modest building on the edge of town. The logo was simple. The smiles in the photos were real. "Who built it?" she asked. "No one knows. Some say a donor. Others say it was someone looking to fix their past." Something about that line stuck to her skin like a whisper. The next day she went. The neighborhood was quiet. Children played on the sidewalk. The building was newer than she expected. Clean, warm-colored walls, a garden out front. It felt honest. She stepped inside and was met with the sound of laughter. Kids ran down the hallway, barefoot and carefree. Volunteers moved around with ease, folding laundry, serving food. And then she saw him. He was kneeling on the floor, surrounded by 3 small boys, all arguing over who got the bigger toy truck. His shirt was untucked, his hands had paint on them, and for the first time she saw him smile. Not the polished CEO grin he used in business meetings, but something gentler, real. Tunde looked up and froze. She hadn't said a word, but he knew. She walked closer. He stood slowly, wiping his hands on a rag. "You found us," he said softly. She didn't reply. He nodded to the kids. "Go play outside. I'll be there soon." They ran off. Silence settled between them. "You built this?" she finally asked. He nodded once. "Why?" He looked around the room, at the shelves, the sleeping mats, the paper drawings on the wall, then back at her. "Because I didn't like the man I became," he said. "I thought money would define me, power, image, but it made me blind." Her expression didn't change. "I didn't do this to win you back," he continued. "This place, it's not about you or us." "Then what is it about?" she asked. "It's about becoming someone who sees people, all of them, the way I used to before I lost myself." He walked over to a table and picked up a framed photo, a group of kids smiling wide. "I came here every day," he said. "No press, no social media, just work. I didn't want applause. I wanted to change something, even if it was just me." Alara watched him. He looked tired, but peaceful. "You taught me that," he said, "not with your words, but with your silence. You could have exposed me. You had every right, but you didn't." She took a deep breath. Her voice softened. "You broke something in me," she said, "but I see you're trying to fix something in yourself." He nodded again. I know I can't undo it, but maybe I can build something better going forward. A moment passed. The kind where no music plays, just two people standing still, letting everything around them breathe. She looked around once more, at the drawings on the wall, the messages of hope, the meals served without judgment. Then she looked back at him, and for the first time in months, she smiled. Just a little. The sun was setting when he knocked on the gate. No entourage, no expensive car. Just him, holding something small in his hand, heart pounding harder than it had during any boardroom pitch or million-dollar deal. The maid answered, then quickly disappeared to call her. Alara stepped out a minute later. She wasn't dressed up, no makeup, just a plain cotton dress and hair tied loosely, but she looked more powerful than she ever had. He didn't speak. He simply walked to the middle of the front garden, dropped to one knee, and held out the bracelet. The same one she had given him as a child, worn, faded, but still intact. She stared at it, frozen. I kept it, he said, voice low, even when I forgot what it meant. She didn't move. He looked up at her, eyes soft, voice steady. I didn't come here as the CEO, or as the man who slapped you. I came as the boy who held your hand under a mango tree and promised he'd never forget you. Her eyes shimmered. I broke that promise once, he continued, but if you'll let me, I want to spend the rest of my life keeping it right. The wind passed through quietly. Even the trees seemed to wait. She stepped forward slowly. Her fingers brushed the bracelet. She held it gently, then looked at him. You lost yourself, she said. I did. But you found your way back. Because of you. A long pause followed, the kind that only people who've truly hurt each other can share. Then, she nodded and whispered one word. Yes. Weeks later, there was no grand ceremony, no flashing lights, no media, just two families, a few close friends, and one very old mango tree. They stood beneath it, the same one that had shaded their childhood, the same tree that had once heard their laughter and silent promises. This time, their hands weren't small. They weren't kids. They were two souls that had walked through fire, together and apart, and had chosen not revenge, but redemption. They exchanged vows with no microphones, just quiet words, honest ones. And when they kissed, it wasn't movie perfect. It was real. After the ceremony, a little girl from the village ran up to Alara and tugged at her dress. Is this where love lives? She asked. Alara smiled, looked at Tunde. Yes, she said softly. This is where it begins again. Later that night, as they sat under the tree, watching the stars peek through the branches, he turned to her. I never thought one slap would change my whole life. She leaned against him, smiling faintly. Kindness costs nothing, she said, but pride can cost everything. And they both knew this wasn't a happy ending. This was a better beginning.